Hello, and welcome to the JasonLand Podcast number 2. I am your host, Jason Eckert. In this episode today, I get to interview Dwayne Burks. Dwayne works for the organization Gaston Together, which is a non-profit organization that helps local families around the area. Dwayne has become a sort of mentor of mine over the past few months. I met him through a sort of career placement service with Goodwill. In this episode, Dwayne and I discuss a lot of local topics. We talk about his background, how he ended up in the industry of nonprofit. We talk a little bit also about the same topic that I talked about in previous podcasts, which is downtown Gastonia and all of that. I think this will probably be the final podcast that really mentions the whole issue of downtown Gastonia. If I find any sort of other opinions that I feel are worthwhile of contributing, I will, but I don't want this podcast to become what really grinds my gears about downtown Gastonia. Instead, more of a podcast that expands into areas of arts and science and people. I've got some different ideas lined up that I'm trying to get going. This podcast was done completely sober at the Gaston County Chamber of Commerce. It kind of gives a representation of the other side of podcasting that I enjoy, and sort of quiet, one-on-one sort of interview style that you can have. But I also completely enjoy the crazy, loud, boozy podcasting as well, and there'll probably be one of those next week. Speaking of beer, if anyone out there is listening who happens to own a brewery, or maybe makes beer in their garage, Hank Schrader style, if you would like to have your beer advertised on this podcast and trade for just giving us something to drink on it, that would be fantastic. You can just contact me through a few of the channels that I'll provide on the places that I post this. But I think that is probably all I gotta say. So thank you to all the people who listened to the very first podcast. I was really surprised to see even that number of people show some sort of interest, so thanks, and I will definitely continue to try to keep putting one of these out a week. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dwayne Burks.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. Start there. Tell me about your college experience.
I grew up in an environment in Hickory where you were pretty much expected to go to one or two really, really conservative colleges. So I chose Bob Jones because academically it seemed the best of the choices. In hindsight, I don't know, but that's where I went, and I was kind of drinking the Kool-Aid. I fell into that subculture and fit in and thought that I was going to be fine with it, but it proved long term to be just emotionally and unsustainable to live at that level of expectation.
To give our listeners a quick example, Bob Jones University is in Georgia, right?
It's in Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay.
When I was there, they had about 6,000 or 7,000 students. It's not that big now.
Someone I know goes to a school called North Greenville University, which is also a private sort of religious college. But to give listeners an idea about Bob Jones, my friend, he's a music major. He told me about how at Bob Jones, the music majors were only allowed to downstroke the instruments and not upstroke them because it was, quote, too sexual. Right. So that might give you an idea of just, sort of level of...
I was there in the early 80s. And the culture then, from my understanding, has not changed a lot. There have been some adjustments, but men and women were very much segregated. There was no interaction without close supervision, more supervision than you would give for a typical 10-year-old birthday party with both genders there. More than that for adults, young adults. Music had to be checked. You couldn't just bring in a CD, a record or at that time a cassette and listen to it. It had to be approved or
tracks.
disapproved. 8 tracks. We were just past the 8-track stage.
Okay.
And of course, the positive side of that is Bob Jones has a great arts department. They have a great religious art museum. They have some great classical music and theater. But when it comes to modern pop culture, they're just completely unplugged on those things.
Yeah.
You know, I remember I happened to be on campus, although I don't think I was a student. I think I was there on a college visit as a high school student the day John Lennon died. And I remember the campus radio station, as soon they had an AP feed or some news feed coming in, AP, whatever, worldwide feed. And as soon as the announcer said, or the broadcaster said, today in New York City, John Lennon dead at age whatever, they began to play Imagine. And Bob Jones University's powers that be cut it and wouldn't play Imagine. They wouldn't even play a 10-second clip of Imagine. So that gives you some idea of how strict it was.
So did you finish your degree there? Or
I did not finish there. I stayed for a while and then moved away and migrated into other things. But I stayed in the subculture until really the mid-'90s is when I began to extract myself from that subculture because it just overwhelmed me.
So what did you end up getting a degree in?
I did not finish a degree.
Didn't finish
Believe
college.
it or not, I did not. And that has been a real challenge. I've had to market myself and let people know that I have the qualifications, even though I may not have the degree.
So what direction were you going in when you were in college that kind of put you down this path?
When I was at Bob Jones, my thought was that I would go out and go into some sort of youth work, probably youth ministry. At that time, a youth director was a big job. You get that job at a church and you're a youth director. So I studied theology and I studied all the things that go along with that while I was at Bob Jones and then at another school for a while when I left there. But realized when my mother became ill and I had to pull out of school, I realized I could get a job flipping burgers, or I could get a job making a living. So I moved into consumer lending, and from that was recruited out into mortgage banking and spent the bulk of my career in that until 2001, 2002.
So,
yeah.
And you started all that what year?
I went away to college in 81, and that's when I graduated high school. So from 81 until 84, I was getting educated. Then I got married in 85. And then from about 84, that range, until 2002, I was in the banking world and finished my career at Citigroup when a group of us our jobs were eliminated.
So you've got to firsthand witness and be part of sort of the past 30 years in terms of this economic process we found in the whole trickle-down Reagan era.
Yep.
From there till now.
Yep.
So you've gotten to see kind of firsthand the idea, the failure of the idea, and now the post-idea, which would be right now. Yep. But when you were, I guess, in the highlight of that, did you kind of see that it was a system on its way to the toilet, or what do you think about it?
I've always believed strongly in capitalism. But I saw the guy I just hung up with on the phone just 2 minutes before we started this would tell me, he said, I've had all this trickle down stuff I can stand. He was a small businessman.
Yeah.
He said it's about to bankrupt me. So he moved away from that into the corporate world, and I hired him in, and he came in, and we worked together. We became to be great colleagues and friends. But he he finished his career. He's now retired, semi-retired. He finished his career back in small business, migrated away from the big corporate world.
So what kind of small business is he doing?
He works now in property management.
Okay. And
he works part-time because he's semi-retired. But he does that for the flexibility of it. It really draws on his expertise as a contractor, but he doesn't have to do those heavy lifting kinds of things that a 25, 30, 35-year-old contractor, up and down ladders, all those things. There comes a point where you say, for his case, he says, I'm 61, 62. It's time to think about not being up and down ladders all day.
So, but when you were in that industry, like mid-'90s, or all the way through,
yeah.
Did you kind of see did you see 2008 coming? Did you see like the parts of it, like this isn't long-term sustainable?
There was no question that the the model, the business model, could not sustain the radical things that were going on. People making mortgages to people who absolutely could not afford them.
Yeah.
They were making them. If you said you made $100,000 a year, it was called a no doc loan. You just made it, and you just stated it and made it. And I can honestly say I did not do that. I did make some higher risk loans. That was part of what I did. But I never did no doc loans, no documentation loans, and every loan that I made you had to qualify for it. And I worked at the branch level, and then I worked at the area level, and then ended my career in that business at working at the regional level, and for a while at the national level, and enjoyed it. But the business there were no restraints on it. It was a new world. It was like the Wild West. And if you chose to retain your integrity, you could do that and operate at a good level. But if you chose to be just an absolute renegade, you could do that too. So both was happening.
To be a saint or to be Gordon Gekko in between.
That's right.
For a very short amount of time, I had a job where I worked for a subprime automotive loan company.
Yep.
And I got to see firsthand how all that works. And part of it, there's a lot of blame towards the people who supply the lending, not just in automotive and in everything.
Right.
But you don't really hear too much about the people who know that they cannot afford a $100,000 loan.
That's
yet
right.
Somebody says, well, you can do it still.
Right.
Like, there's got to be some blame to the people.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And then not only do you have the people who were making the loans, whether they were mortgages or car loans or whatever, you had the people who were taking out the loans, but then you had the secondary investors who now we've learned were betting that the industry would fail.
Yeah, from the get-go.
So you look at that and think, wow. And it just was a system flawed from the beginning, and there was no accountability. That was part of the challenge of it. I fell into a piece where I had because of my background as a very right or wrong kind of person, everything was either yes or no, right or wrong, black or white. I became the guy who would come in and clean up a mess. Yeah. And I ended up going all over the country and cleaning up a mess after it happened, or taking a group that was not doing well and kind of moving them to where they could produce business and do it with integrity.
Yeah.
But again, if there was not proper management, proper supervision, then once you pull away, it's up to that individual person on the street. It's up to them exercising integrity or not.
Yeah. So, time that by a couple million people, and you have some corruption, obviously.
I saw some crazy things, and I saw some good people do some good things. I saw some honest people make a good living, but I saw some who just disregarded the truth and went on.
You know, it's funny. Like, the reason I left that job is because it was a temp job, and there was a contractual weird thing that they didn't allow to pay me. But had it all worked out, I could have easily, right at this very moment, like, be doing something like that, being kind of like into that world. But just through that kind of weird grace of whatever not happening, going in a nonprofit and here, like, I've gone down a totally different road. But there's a point in time where I could have, like, easily just jumped into the corruption.
Sure.
Because I was young, I didn't really know what I want to do.
Yeah.
So to get a taste of it, though, really put it all into perspective. Like, you feel bad for the people who are facilitating these sort of things, but the people who accept them, even if they aren't misinformed, like, they're not entirely at,
Yeah, there's culpability all the way around.
Exactly.
And now North Carolina has responded with a voluminous set of requirements and restrictions, and made it difficult for people with integrity to lend money in North Carolina. But it can be done. Mm-hmm. But it was too little, too late. Yeah. Dodd-Frank came along and did massive amounts of restrictions and expectation. But again, it was after, as we say in the South, the horse was already out, and then we closed the barn door. So it was too little, too late.
So you leave that industry, and now. Tell us a little bit about the different organizations you work for.
Well, in 2001, very late in the year, right after 9/11, it was like November, I came into work one day. I was working for Citigroup, and I thought I would be there indefinitely. I thought it was a place where I could come off the road because I'd been traveling nationally. I thought I'd come off the road. I had a younger family, and was kind of fat, dumb, and happy and making a decent living, and wasn't having to travel. And I got a notification that a layer of management would be eliminated, and I was in that layer. Mm-hmm. So there I was. I got a fair severance package and moved on. From that, my wife and I just made some pretty big life decisions. Mm-hmm. We just decided that we were going to try to do more than just make a living. I wanted to make a difference. Mm-hmm. So one thing led to another. I could go on forever, but I ended up going to England. I'd always wanted to go to England. Mm-hmm. So I went, and I was like this kid in college, just finding my way. I went to England, stayed for about a week, met some folks, interacted. And through all of this, I'd always done lay ministry in churches, never had a formal ordained role. I had the opportunity extended to me to go to England and do a short, prescribed 6-month lay ministry role. And I did that.
With a specific church?
With a small church in a place called Hartlepool, England.
What was the denomination?
It was a small Baptist church.
Okay, in England.
Yeah, in Hartlepool, England. I walked in to be the lay speaker on a Sunday morning. Somebody had set it up. Here's this American, come hear him. An American can draw a crowd in the northeast of England because we're unique. We have a funny accent. So I went in, I spoke, and it just was a great morning. And after the service that Sunday, I had dinner or lunch with an elder and a deacon from the church, and we began to talk. And we learned that church had been through some really hard times. There had been some sort of relationship problem, just all kinds of things. They were without a pastor, and they said, well, would you consider coming here and just being our lay minister for 6 months? You can do that without a visa. You just do it on a passport. And I'm like, well, sure. So I came home and told my wife and said, what do you think? She said, well, let's pray about it. Let's consider it. We did. We put the word out that we were thinking about doing this. And it was less than 6 months' time, about $36,000 in little bits and pieces was raised. Somebody who did mission work where were they? They were in Romania, contacted our church and said, we need a place to stay for 6 months. We're coming home for what's called a furlough. So they came home, they rented our house for the 6 months we were away. Mm-hmm. So it all washed out and worked. And I'm not overstating it, by going to England and having that great experience there. There's a wonderful time with those wonderful people in that small little church up there. It was transformational, and we came back, and after our time was finished, and I began to work with middle schoolers, and from there I knew that human service and ministry would be where I would probably spend the rest of my career. So that's the kind of a skipping a stone across a huge ocean of experience.
And so now in 2013, almost 2014, what organizations are you involved with in Gastonia, and what are they trying to do in Gastonia?
I work with two organizations, nonprofit organizations. One is Gaston Together, and our piece of the pie is called Keeping Families Intact. That's where you and I met. And our job is to connect Gaston County citizens with resources to move beyond where they are. Mm-hmm. The county came to Gaston Together 3 years ago and said, we can effectively tell people where our services are, but we need someone to efficiently make those connections. Oh. Can you form a nonprofit and do that? So they did. And that's what we do. And we focus on helping people with employment readiness, with life skills such as healthy living, financial management, parenting, those kinds of things. And we help people make those connections, support them. That's part of what I do. And then the other thing I do as a career job is I work with the Gaston Faith Network, which kind of dovetails. The Faith Network's purpose and for existence is to help churches and human service agencies connect. Churches have a great pool of volunteers. Human service agencies have a great need for volunteers. Right. So if we can help those two connect, then human needs will be met.
One thing I noticed very quickly when I first met you is your ability. You're involved with a lot of faith-based organizations, but you seem to keep your head above that and really just walk into this secular world thinking.
in activities. Like for someone like me, I come from the total opposite. I'm just like, stone cold, like Buddhist, chill kind of guy. And you're able to, like you said, no matter what, this is the South. South equals churches. Churches equal large volunteer bases.
Yep.
But you're really good at like communicating with those people and getting them to work with maybe much more like secular needs. Because across the board, like the needs, especially this area, they need to be helped. Everybody, no matter what religious background, none.
Yep.
And you have a very good ability to get to and from. So what has your experiences been with trying to get churches to help out those that may have no interest in faith whatsoever? Like someone like me, essentially.
Yeah, I think there are a couple layers to that. One, I was reared in an environment where I wasn't expected to think. I was just expected to accept what I was told. Well, as I grew and matured, and now that I'm 50 years old, I've learned that I have a mind, and I have a responsibility to engage that mind.
Exactly.
And part of that is engaging it in my faith.
Exactly.
And I've found that there are people of faith with whom I have many agreements, and there are people of faith with whom I have disagreements theologically, and that's okay. The differences for those of the Christian faith, especially, the places where we disagree are minimal. We agree on the major points, and the places where we agree. Places where we disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable. Just because somebody doesn't share my view on this or that doesn't mean that I can't cooperate with them to meet a human need.
And part of me wants to think that even the sort of differences between people who are very religious and people who are not, I think they're blown out of proportion. Because I really think like a lot of people who are very religious and me would agree on like you said, 99% of things. I think it's just the public and the media at times can really like kind of blow up those differences to make them seem like they outweigh.
That's right.
Now, at certain times, though, they do get a little out of control, especially with religious organizations attempting to, outlaw same-sex marriages or trying to like impose religious viewpoints on a country that I consider, not religious.
Right.
I'm sure you know about the recent story about all these nonprofit organizations and some businesses who are more religious-based trying to argue against the aspects of the Affordable Health Care Act about covering birth control. Now that's going to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And so that would be an example of like it getting kind of out of control. But I think for the most part, you're right in saying that generally if you give people, no matter what religious background or none, the opportunity to help, like they're probably going to want to help.
Right. People want to help. They want to do good things. The challenge is, can we do good things without an expectation of some sort of return on that?
Yes.
In other words, if I help a young family who's struggling and maybe they're pregnant, maybe they haven't been married, maybe they're struggling financially, and we help them with education and we help them with perhaps some money, which often is not the answer. The need is bigger than just money. They don't need a handout. They need a hand up, to use a cliche.
Yeah.
Do I expect them to then come to my church and adhere to my faith and do this? Well, my faith teaches me that if Christ is lifted up, he will draw men and women to himself. My job is to lift up Christ, and I do that by being respectful and kind and decent and loving people, because that was the great command that Jesus left. When it was all said and done, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
And that what has always irked me about a lot of organizations that go out across the planet to help and rebuild societies. In Africa, I think specifically Nairobi, you have a lot of cases of indigenous religions vanishing from the planet because of missionaries who are essentially say, we will help you out, but you got to follow our religion. And on the extreme end of that, you have charity organizations that are basically exporting like homophobia to countries. Then they're causing these like these real issues of people murdering people who happen to be gay because of essentially exported theology. I guess what I'm trying to say is like I wish that religious organizations, when they go out and abroad, I wish they would just like keep it down and just help to rebuild the societies instead of trying to like morph them into this westernization. But you see the same thing with like war. I mean, the first 10 years of this new century was all about trying to impose a totally different mindset onto people who might not be interested in the first place.
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I went in 2000. I don't remember 2003. I took my first trip of a couple into Romania, and one of the things I noticed while I was there, I went into this beautiful church building, and it was very American in its structure and its architecture. And came time for the service, and we met in the upstairs, the regular sanctuary. But I learned that normally the church met in the basement. And I asked the minister, I said, why are you meeting in the basement normally? Why are you not using the upstairs in the winter months? And he said, we can't afford to heat it. He said, we're poor people. We live in a poor part of the world, a developing country, as it were. And what had happened is well-intentioned Americans had gone there and helped build this church and built it the way we would build it here. Uh-huh. And it didn't fit the need there. Uh-huh. So, and I understand that we have a theological belief and we have a biblical belief, and we adhere to that. I don't say just paper over our differences, as my friend Gary Wentz says, but don't divide over those until it's absolutely necessary. I'm reading a book right now about Amsterdam, and if you read in the 15, 16, 1700s in Amsterdam, it was a bloodbath, and it was all over religion. It was all over one church entity versus another church entity, religious entity, trying to gain control. And Christ did not commission his church on earth, his body as it were, to control the earth. He commissioned us here to share him. And what people do with that is between them and God. I can't be someone's Holy Spirit, as it were. They're God. So it's kind of easy if you want to manipulate people to a desired end, but then you got to keep them at that desired end. So you got to drive them into fear.
You know, I was learning about the story of the Anabaptists in the beginnings of the printing press. And
right.
The story of the Anabaptists, which I highly recommend anyone listening research, but just to do a broad overview, it was a story about what happened when a certain group of people got a hold of printed versions of the Bible. This is during the medieval times when the printing press comes out, and how a group of Anabaptists took over a city in Germany. I can never remember the name of it, but I think we're living in a time less religious, but still as important in terms of printing press moments in history with like things like technology right now. And I guess how that works out is that the price of technology is continually getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And by allowing people without much income to have access to cheap technology, which one way or another will all link back to the same sources, is one way to help to help educate people. It's almost the end of the year, and over this past year, what has your experiences been with trying to help people in Gastonia, and what do you want to accomplish next year? What are some of your goals for the new year?
A couple things. I found that our churches there are many of them. We have 700 some churches in a county with 210,000 people. Some are small, most are small, some are larger. The churches really, really have a heart to help. They just sometimes don't quite know what's the best thing to do. Where can we help? Where can we use, for some, our limited resources, for others, our abundant resources? Where can those be best utilized in a way that's consistent with what we believe? And that's important, and it's not something to be taken lightly. So I would like to see our churches communicate more, learn more about what is going on, and find places and ways within their faith tradition that are comfortable to help meet human needs. I would love to see more of that, and I think we will. The Faith Network is doing some very distinct things in that arena. We view the county as having 4 quadrants: north, out, southeast, and west, and we're building strong allies in each quadrant to help us connect to meet human need, and that's part of what we do.
So I guess, what are some things that you see? What are some issues affecting the people that you're trying to help the most over the next 5 years? What are some things you really want to tackle to get people further along?
Some of the things that are presenting issues, that are expensive issues from the human capital perspective and from the financial perspective, are things like rampant poverty, generational poverty.
Yeah, a lot of that in the South.
Yeah, we have a strong large percentage of people living in generational poverty. They've never known that they could do anything else.
Yeah.
So churches, for instance, can not only show people that there is a new and better way spiritually, there are ways to impact their lives in a very human way, not just to give them a handout, but to show them a bridge away from where they are.
So I've been thinking about that a lot, in the sense of how within 20 years' time, a lot of the jobs done by people living in poverty, which right now around here would be some manual labor, some fast food, that kind of thing, these sort of 21st century jobs, even those will soon be replaced by either computers or machines,
right,
or what jobs will be left for instance, like with warehousing and manufacturing, there is a huge abundance in hiring going on right now, but it's for people with either experience in maintaining machines or programming robotics, like middle-level management people who can look over artificial intelligence. So what options do you see for people living below the poverty line over the next 20 years? Like, how can these people's lives be utilized for society's sake?
My concern is not just the people who are currently below the poverty line, but the people who are just above it, and the economic environment, the production environment is changing around us. How do we respond to that?
Yeah.
How do people with the intelligence capacity to do the jobs, but they have that, but they're going to need retraining. Gaston College is just full to the gills with people who are retooling themselves to do a different kind of job. So I'm concerned about how we'll fill all those. But I hear from just last month, we met with month before last, with a group of CEOs from here in Gaston, and they tell us that the very jobs you described are in high demand. The workers to fill those jobs are in high demand. But it's more than just being able to do the math. It's more than just being able to program the computer. You have to know kind of why you're doing that and how it's doing that. And those are some of the things that our community college will be critical in us teaching people. I think, this is personally, I think that adult to adult mentoring could be have a huge impact. You take, if my number is right, and I think I'm quoting this from memory, but I'm quoting it correctly, the average manager for the kind of job you just described is in his or her mid-50s.
Yeah.
If that person's ready to retire in the next 8 years,
there's a whole lot of people like that right now.
Yeah, they could mentor some people to come along and take those jobs while they're getting the academic training that they need. So I would love to see some adult to adult mentoring that goes beyond just the workplace. In the workplace, it's really apprenticing.
Yeah.
In life, it's more mentoring.
Yeah, I was about to mention that there's, you don't hear the word apprenticeship come up much in the United States, and it's always, when you think of apprenticeship jobs right now, you think of very specific craft building. But
that's right.
There's no reason that term can't apply to training somebody how to be a new manager for specific.
That's right.
Even like a car dealer.
And the Germans have mastered it. I mean, they have it down pat. There's a company in Charlotte that's a German company called FAF. They have an alliance with our local school system and others around, I'm sure, and they bring in interns their junior year. Student can learn a trade, a good trade, that will pay a good living and get paid to work, paid to go to class, get their tuition paid, and if the student applies him or herself, can go all the way through for an associate's, a bachelor's, and an engineering specialty and or a master's degree over a 6 to 8 year period. And the Germans have proved that that's more cost effective than going out and recruiting somebody from another industry and retraining them.
You know, One thing that drives me crazy about our country is that we're really, really bad at finding people the jobs that can suit them best talent-wise. Like, the whole idea of making it on your own, it has its advantages, but it seems like the disadvantage is just like, I got a certain set of traits. Put me in the contact with the person that can help me the most.
Yep.
And
you cut back to the beginning of our discussion. I've had to do that because I don't have some of the formal training that some of my colleagues have.
Yeah.
So I've had to live that model.
Yeah.
So, but employment and employment readiness and employment people who are underemployed, getting them to the proper level of employment for their abilities. Excuse me. I think that's a key piece of where we're headed. Poverty, it ties right into that. The two that go together that we focused a lot on at the Faith Network are also the family and teen pregnancy. We have had a teen pregnancy epidemic in this county, which is
starting to go down.
It is moving the right way. We saw, again, I'm saying this from memory, but I think we had a 13% reduction in 2013 or 2012. Excuse me. Just this morning, looked at the numbers. We had, again, I'm doing this from memory. We had a 280 teen pregnancies in Gaston County last year. That's a considerable reduction.
Yeah.
Another thing that we're very proud of is, and thrilled about, is the gap between African American and Caucasian teen pregnancies has been eliminated.
Oh,
and
excellent.
The health experts, the public health experts from all over the country with whom I've talked and from whom I've heard, tell me that they just didn't know that could be done in the amount of time that it happened here. So that's exciting. But now the question becomes, okay, we've helped people. Abstinence has increased. The numbers show that. Comprehensive methods have increased. So both of those are contributing to reduced teen pregnancy. Now let's get those teens employable. Let's get them ready to go to work. And some would disagree. I'm an educator at heart. I'm a teacher at heart. That's what I'm about.
Yeah.
But not everybody needs to go away to a 4-year college. There are people who can get a 2-year degree and go to work and be highly successful, and then maybe down the road finish their 4-year degree if needed.
I'm 26. I'm probably the last generation of people who will get, the majority of which will have college degrees.
Yeah.
I started college in 2005 before the crash and everything. Everything was kind of going all right.
Yeah.
But the truth is now it all comes back around to saying that most information that you need to learn how to do something, you can get off the internet.
That's right.
Like, I'm about to get involved in a lot of sort of things involving filming, and I don't know that much about filming, but I've been teaching myself it through the internet, through YouTube videos. We're working right now on a project to try to create quick and easy YouTube videos that show people how to get information.
Yep.
And I like to think on some level the reason why teen pregnancy has gone down is because even though I don't know too much about sex education in public schools these days, but I guarantee it's probably a little politicized. It doesn't matter. Go on YouTube and you can learn everything you need to know. Amazon.com, start up an account, get a gift card, and you're good to go.
Yep.
And so the ability to have all this quick information is starting to eliminate the need for higher education. The flip side, though, is that the best thing that I got out of college was the ability to think.
Right.
So I don't know if learning things with YouTube will reward you that.
If we figure out a way in our country to combine the ability to think with the ability to research your areas of passion and interest, then we've hit upon something. Mm-hmm. And in no way am I discouraging pursuing your degrees, but
neither am I.
At the same time, if you go away for a degree and you're not at an emotionally mature enough spot to benefit from that, and all you get is a piece of paper and $100,000 in debt, maybe it was better to wait a while.
Yeah,
and that's not been the case. That's not been what's been preached from the educators and the educational forums, but it's proving to be the case now. I'm deeply concerned about what that means for educators, because we need good educators, and we've not made it easy in this state to be an educator. And you have to get a 4-year degree and more to teach in today's world. So how are we going to continue to value education and educators when we're not saying go get a 4-year degree? Well, short answer, and it's not all encompassing, but the short answer I believe is understand that a 4-year degree is part of the education process, but there are other components now, technology being one.
What do you think of privatized schools and the sort of rise of privatized school industry?
My children, 3 of my children graduated, 2 from public school, 1 from a private education as far as homeschool the last year, and graduated early and went on to ECU. And then my 4th child is at a public charter school.
Charter school, that's the word I'm thinking of.
That was a big decision for me because I'm such a proponent of public education.
Yeah.
That was a big decision.
Charter schools is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
It's a slippery slope back towards inadvertent segregation in schools.
One of the concerns I had with having my son give the opportunity, and he made the decision. We let him make the decision when it came down to him being off the waiting list. One of the big concerns I had was that he would not be exposed to ethnic diversity.
Yeah.
His school seems to be working on that piece, and that's good. I do agree with our current superintendent of public instruction in Gaston County, who says unequivocally, if you're going to take public money, you have to serve every child that comes to your door.
Like, there's got to be a way that ensures that. Because, that's worries me the most. Like, because on paper, charter school sounds like the most great idea ever. Yeah. It takes all the politics. Well, most of the politics have taxpayer-funded education, but part of it just acts like is Martin Luther King's like turning in his grave right now, because there's got to be more oversight, which kind of becomes another issue of like.
It becomes an issue of where does it create more bureaucracy?
Yeah,
and I don't know, but there are some issues as a human needs person. I focus on human needs. It concerns me that students in Gaston County who would like to have what's going on at the charter school can't do it because they don't have the money to get there. Exactly. And there's no bus.
It's almost like, wouldn't it just make the most sense that our public school system in this country just works and that we don't have to create third-party options? Like, can we not just get it together where kids have enough? Like, it just, part of me just automatically goes into conspiracy mode when I think about just how much money is taken from education. The fact that you ever even hear public officials say, hey, you know what we should do? Take money out of educating the next generation. It just blows my mind. Like, how do these people think like that?
Yeah. I believe public school or charter school, whichever, because they're both public entities.
Yeah.
The key to the first step, at least, maybe not the key, but the first step is a true accountability for where is the money coming and where's it going.
Exactly.
Every business in the world that's a legitimate business, we're back to that, has to do that. And in government entities, whether it's local government, federal government, state school systems, local school systems, or whatever, there's such a bureaucracy that it's hard to know. We spent this much money on this, and this was the outcome.
Yeah.
Now, a nonprofit, it's that way. Very simple. If you get a $50,000 grant and you say you're going to do this with the grant, you have to do it.
Yeah.
If you don't get the objectives and you don't show good faith that you tried to get those objectives, somebody's wanting that money back. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work that way in the government. So that, I don't know that it's a key, but it is the key, but it is a key piece. And then, of course, we get into No Child Left Behind and Common Core and all those things.
But there are some cases with nonprofits where you see the amount of money that wasn't spent go to the CEO. You have sometimes sort of these backdoor sort of situations.
Yeah.
As a former employee of the Red Cross, I saw some of that. You know, like I was a temp and I made $12, but they usually made like 16. But considering the bank account of the Red Cross, you think the employees would make about $20 an hour, but they didn't.
Yeah.
But
And I'm hearing, and I have not been able to verify this. Somebody who's listening may be able to say, yeah, this is the case, and here's proof. I just haven't researched it. But I was told earlier this month or this year that some of the CEOs, it's become so, or the executive directors is what they're typically called, it's become so competitive to get the money that's available, to get into the pools of money, that companies nonprofits are hiring MBAs at really good local level salaries, 75 to 150,000, 125,000 a year, so that they have the right manager in place to access those funds and manage those. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know, but I would like to see the model and see the thinking behind it, if that's really the case. And maybe somebody knows and can tell us more about it.
lends credence to the idea, like for me, if I ever went back to school for higher education than a 4-year degree, I was master's in business. It seems to be a good way to go.
Right.
Good across the board.
We encounter a lot of students. I've spent 8 of the last 9 years working in middle school. And we had a lot of middle school and early high school students who wanted to be in law enforcement.
Interesting.
And almost without exception, the police officers and the law enforcement professionals with whom we would have them talk would say to them, get a master's in business, because we need that skill. And you don't think of that for law enforcement. You think criminal justice or this or that. So you're right. I mean, that master's in business can be an important part of the picture or the pie. But now we've just been all over the map with things. But for the faith community of Gaston County, I would love to see us be willing to collaborate on items where we're comfortable collaborating and expand our comfort zone just a little bit for where we're willing to collaborate without, again, to quote Gary, without papering over our differences. And I would like to see our human service agents that are great. We have some great human service agencies in this community, be able to link with the churches to meet human needs more efficiently with fewer staff members, paid staff, and rather have more volunteers, and without a lot of duplication. We have some duplication now, and the economy is probably going to take care of some of that. So, I would love to see, those are things I would love to see. I would love to see us continue to move forward on with teen pregnancy, with the movement there. One thing that is unique to Gaston County is the Centers for Disease Control is pumping $5.8 million into Gaston County to stem the tide of teen pregnancy. The initiative is in its 4th of 5 years. Well, in 2015, that program goes away. Everything that's been going on within that program goes away because the funding ends. It's a 5-year plan. So now it's incumbent on our schools, on our faith community, on our government, on our citizenry to figure out how we're going to fill that void. Because, nature abhors a vacuum, and there's going to be a vacuum there. So
that's terrifying. Yeah,
that's something that I hope our faith community can help set the pace for and move forward. And that's a big, big issue that's coming down the pike.
One thing that I'm trying to use these podcasts to do is get different people's takes on downtown Gastonia, this less than a square mile piece of land full of buildings that has, I think, more potential for revitalization than anything around here. We talked a little bit last time about the project. I can't remember what it's called. It's about the project trying to move artists in. Could you tell a little bit about that and the status of it?
Yeah, there are a couple things there. One, if you think about downtown Gastonia, if you're listening to this podcast and you're nearby, I encourage you to drive in as if you know nothing about the county. And that's our county seat. And think, what do we do? It is not helping us get business. In my opinion, it's helping drive business away.
Precisely.
We must address it. It's being addressed in small pieces, but it's going to have to be addressed in the macro.
It does.
There are a couple good things happening on the edge of town, on the west end, just blocks from where we sit right now. The Luray Mill is being revitalized. and that has been going on in the effort to make that happen. I first learned of it 23 years ago. Talked with Lucy Pinniger, who has been behind it every step of the way. That is a reality. It's happening. It's being changed as we speak from a dead hundreds of thousand square feet, huge historical building. It'll be retail and residential, and it's going to be great. That's happening. In the center of Gastonia, I am told that there are some things in the works involving artists, but I don't know any facts about it. I would be purely speculating, and I'm just waiting for the powers that be to say what I know, what I perceive to have happened about money being raised and those kinds of things. I'm waiting for them to say, yes, that's real.
Yeah.
So I'm just waiting for them to press the button and say, nope, it fell through, or yes, it's going to happen. And I know it's been before the city council and the county commission, and it's been discussed, but I'm not privy to the next step.
So I didn't really think about it that way, but when you said it's driving away business, it's a really good way to look at it, because what signifies a city is its downtown. This sort of across the board collection of bars, collection of coffee shops, collections of all these sort of like arts division activities where people go to. And I think you're totally right. And the absence of that is just startling. And I think that the creation of that would change everything around here.
Yep.
In the last podcast, a lot was said about local government in their opinions on revitalizing downtown. You know a lot more about that than I do. What is your take on the opinion of local government on getting downtown going on? What have you found with that?
I'm not involved as a member of any council or anything like that, but I will say that we know that we no longer have a downtown development director. That position was eliminated for whatever reason. So that concerns me as someone who's passionate about downtown. I'm not sure. I really cannot answer for them other than to say that I haven't heard in a united voice the county commission or the city council in a united voice say we believe in downtown Gastonia.
Yeah.
I've heard remnants of them say that, and I've heard individual members say that, but with one united voice say we're going to make downtown the jewel of our city and of our county. Since Mayor Jenny left office, I haven't heard that in any kind of loud, firm, clear way, and I would love to hear that.
And I think that this is a really cool theory, and to keep it really short, it's a theory about how, despite the gridlock on a federal, state, and local level government across the country, a lot of really cool revitalizations going on. Because there's a lot of people my age who are bored and don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
And despite all that, what I'm just trying to look into, help out, be the cheerleader of if necessary, is the revitalization of that area. And I've just been trying to get different people's opinions on what they think about it. And what I'm starting to learn is that everybody pretty much thinks the same thing. It's like, hey, this is a really cool idea. And with this podcast, in its beginning stages, I wanted to expand. What it's starting out of is just like a way to let everybody who probably had the genesis of an idea, hey, this is a good idea. Generally, there's a lot of people out there with similar ideas.
Yep.
That's the best thing about the internet. That's the
right.
best ability of just like collecting a lot of like collective minds. Sometimes this turns out for the worst of reasons on the internet, but for the most part, it's for the better.
That's right.
And like right now, there's the solidification of downtown would be Zoe's. The concept.
Yeah.
It's doing really good. They had a really good show last Saturday, and just like any good game of chess, like you got your queen in the right spot, but you got to get the other pieces there.
Yeah.
And I think this coming year, 2014, as the country sort of finds its way out of the recession is on paper over, but finding new industries is kind of the next step. It's like 1944 right now. It feels like that, at least. And what I'm curious to see, and what I'm wanting to see is what kind of businesses are out there trying to revitalize. Like I just did a photo shoot for Russin Mill, local beer maker, and there was a huge outpouring. What other industries are out there around here in someone's backyard that's just waiting for the...
What are people doing from their homes that they could expand into a storefront at the right time? Without a doubt, we have to figure out how to at least get a good, solid boutique hotel there.
Yeah.
We need a full-service hotel, but maybe the boutique hotel becomes a stepping stone. And there's been some pretty serious dialogue about that in the press recently. Yeah. With one of the old historic buildings there. So that would be a really nice thing to see happen if it indeed comes to fruition. But, the Faith Network started as a downtown entity. Mm-hmm. We have a small office inside a church that lets us use space, but really to have a downtown office in the county seat would be a great thing at some point as we grow. So. But you're right. There are other creative businesses, and they don't have to be necessarily of the arts. Even though I love the arts. I mean, I love it. Arts on Main. It's exciting to see what the potential is there, but it's like everything else that they need the money to do it, and they'll have to raise that money.
And you're right. Like it doesn't have to be literally an entire street of independently owned coffee shops.
Right.
Like it should be like a combination of just different businesses. Like I can imagine like a business that operates a selection of 3D printers that's just making products for people, just 3D printing products through 3D printing machinery.
Right.
I'm trying to find someone who has 3D printers. If anyone's out there who has 3D printers, please contact me. I want to find out more about these inventions that will probably be changing.
Well, look at downtown Greenville, South Carolina. I lived in Greenville, South Carolina when I was in school, when I was first married. It was... I mean, no offense, but it was kind of a dump.
Yeah.
We could look out our window into Cleveland Park. It was worn down. We could look across the way into the Harper Brothers area, the Harper Brothers Industry area, which was a dangerous park at that time. It wasn't safe to go in there in the evenings, especially in the early evenings. Now, that has just blossomed, and there are coffee shops, and there are art galleries, and there are retail businesses. There's a store, I was just there 2 weeks ago, a kitchen gadgetry specialty store of some size and scope. Well, there's a market for that, and that's exciting. But the key is we have to draw the right industry, and I believe we have to figure out how to draw people your age. My generation, we went to school, we found a job, and we went where that job was. Your generation, you go where you want to live.
Yeah.
And then you find the job or create the job.
Yeah, I like to think that I heard it put really well once by Gus Sorolla, who works for a company I really like called Rooster Teeth. They make internet-based kind of just entertainment and stuff. Yeah. But he put it that what the benefit of the internet is that in theory you don't have to really move to where the jobs are at. You just kind of create the content of the jobs there.
That's right.
And so, like, a hop, skip, and jump away, there is a very successful downtown. That would be Belmont.
Right.
And Belmont's downtown very accurately represents the kind of people that live there. They're a very high-income area. What a downtown area really is it's just a manifestation of the community that surrounds it. Right. Gastonia is a pretty diversified place. There's like a lot of different stuff. There's been a lot of different stuff. Sometimes it feels like a ghost town. Sometimes it feels like it's being revitalized. But the downtown of Gastonia would represent that. It would be a collection of every kind of business imaginable. Yeah. And one thing I've identified is that there's not a good network of promotion for what's going on. Like, there's still a lot of people who had no idea about Zoe's, had no idea about any of the other businesses there. And I guess that's what I'm also might be doing as a job, is just helping to promote, inform, and engage.
Well, and that's one of the questions I would have for you and for listeners of this podcast. I don't think we're unique in this, but we are. It is a challenge. We have a real challenge of communication in this community.
Yeah.
How do we communicate good news? How do we communicate bad news? How would we communicate in the event of an emergency? We have some mechanisms in place for that, but how do we communicate the good things that are going on?
Yeah.
There are great things happening here in the churches, in the human service agencies, in our health department. Our health department is one of the best in the country.
Right.
Well, how do we communicate that? I think the readership on the local paper is about 30,000.
Huh.
That was the last number I heard. I think that's right. I think this statistics and studies tell us that's an aging readership.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do we reach those people, but how do we reach the other almost 200,000 people in the community who aren't reading the paper?
Yeah.
How do we do that? And I would love to be part of a broadcast, or at least hear a podcast on that. How do we communicate effectively?
I can tell you that it all boils down to the phrase that changed my life, which is new media. And new media is just this idea of journalism. It's an idea of using social media. It's of using podcasts. It's of using written pieces as well. But it's this idea of journalism beyond just working for a newspaper. Yeah. Back when I was in college, they were still under the idea that you go into a career in journalism, you get a job at like a decent newspaper, you work your way up to like the New York Times or like Reuters or somewhere abroad. But I don't want to buy the New York Times. But the thing is that I don't have to. I can just make the content myself and start promoting it. And what that is breeding is a whole new generation of journalists who are usually reporting on what's closest by, like in my case, Gastonia.
Right.
And so it's really cool that all these things that do get brushed over, I think, by our local newspapers. I don't know if anyone else is doing this, but I know I get to like go out and present this information to people.
Right. And
that's really fun. Like I feel like I'm able to just inform. And I guarantee that if people were more informed as the event's going on, there would be more turnout. And I got some other ideas that I won't talk about on the podcast, but I'm kind of in development with some people on options to just inform of what's going on and make it really easy to do so in order to make it happen.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the greatest challenges is how do we communicate the good news?
Yeah.
I understand that the old thing, if it bleeds, it leads and all that, but let's talk about how to communicate the good news.
Yeah.
For me, the local paper, when I don't read a hard paper, but when I do look at a paper, I go first to the hometown section because my national and international news I'm going to get instantly on the internet. I'm not going to wait for it to be published in a paper. I'm not going to wait for it to hit the paper's website. I'm going to see it instantly.
It's weird, though, how I do find some random articles in the back of the Gazette that I haven't seen on, like, Twitter. Like, usually they're stories abroad, like, basically just, like, stuff someone grabs off the AP website. But I found some really interesting information. Like, how did this not get reported on social media? So maybe newspapers aren't entirely dead, but they're definitely got to be better content oriented.
Well, and our newer publisher at the newspaper really has his ear to the ground on this. I have not met with him, but a close colleague of mine has, and came away just thrilled with the forward thinking and the out of the box thinking that he brought to his new job or his new role at the paper, and that's exciting. I would love to see our paper's readership double. Through online, through this, through that. I will say this for the few people who might hear this or might not hear it, the new fee structure for the paper's website is just not working for me and for many of my friends. I find myself daily going other places to get quick bits of news that I used to go there and get. So that means those advertisers that used to be able to know they were going to be able to advertise and I would see them on the Gazette's website, I'm not going to see it now because I'm going other places. And that's just me. And that's a recent change they've made. So, I'm one voice of 200,000 in the community, but that's my experience.
To end this on an optimistic note, what we're talking about is going on in a lot of places right now in the United States, but it's going in the right direction. Like right now, I guarantee you, there are downtown areas that are being revitalized that are doing exactly what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And I have a good idea that the same things are going to go down here. It's just a matter of figuring out how to make it just happen.
Yep.
I write for a magazine called OPB, and I like to think that in a year or 2 years' time, that will be more than just 1 or 2 pages deep. It will be a collection of what's going on downtown, because this will be kicking off, because the going all the way back to the past 30 years of this trickle-down mindset, I think it's still around, but people realizing that there's got to be another way to make things happen.
Yeah. Local
businesses working together instead of working against each other and just trying to common collective.
Yeah.
We're stronger together than we are separate.
And we have some strong things downtown.
Yeah.
Our county seat is there.
Yeah.
We have a strong couple of churches downtown who are engaged and plugged into the community. That's great. We have some, we have some old businesses that are classic businesses that are going to be there. They don't seem to be going anywhere. There's some new folks like Zoe's. There are things, that seem to be doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in and out of coffee shops all over the world, and you go into Zoe's and you look around and you think, man, unless I'm missing something, they're doing this right.
Yeah.
This really is a good place.
Yeah.
It's a place to meet. I use it frequently. So there are good things going on.
Yeah.
Just how do we get to the critical mass?
Yeah.
How do we get it so that instead of maybe the standard, a boarded up building is the exception?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. Instead of and if you look at the prices on the buildings, whoever is the realtor on them, they're just waiting patiently for someone to walk in and set up shop.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just seems one of those things like powder keg moments for the best.
And if this arts thing that's being whispered about, if it really is real, and I agree, don't announce it until it's a deal or not a deal.
Totally.
But if that were to come to fruition the way that I perceive it, that's transformational. But again, we just don't know. Until the facts are out there, there's no need for me to speculate other than to wish.
Yeah.
I'm like a kid looking for Christmas morning. So.
Any advice to a generation of 20-somethings looking to make a difference?
That's a good question. I typically don't give advice. I found that if you can get people to answer questions and make their own decisions, but if I were talking to my son or daughters who were right in that age group, I would say to them, engage your mind in your faith or your spirituality. If you're going to say, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, okay, look a little more deeply into that and say, okay, what does that really mean? And engage your mind in that, and let, in my faith tradition, and I believe it's true, let the Holy Spirit work through that. But that's one thing, engage your mind. And I guess the most important thing is pursue your passion. Don't just go get a job that pays the bills.
Yeah.
And pursue your passion. It took me mining my way through a career that I enjoyed and was profitable and was good to me, but it wasn't my passion.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. It took me working through that to find my passion.
Yeah.
And you don't make as much money sometimes pursuing your passion.
Nope.
But you adjust your lifestyle and you go on. So those are things that come to my mind. And don't write off us old guys. We really
not at all.
We really want to be a part and to contribute. And I say old guys, I mean guys in my range, the 50 and plus, but also the people in the 70 and the 80 and the 90. They've lived it.
So
they're filled with wisdom.
I don't know if a lot of people are doing this right now, but part of what this is going to be about finding people from the greatest generation before they drop off and get their opinion on what was going on back then.
That's right.
I
have a friend from that era, and he keeps talking about victory gardens that were big during World War II, and how important it would be now. Well, that plays right in to everything that's being taught about healthy living and organic farming and all those things. They all play into that.
The greatest conspiracy is the idea that eating healthy is expensive.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's cheaper usually.
So it's just everybody has something to contribute.
Yeah. That's been the theme through the people I've talked to so far, and I bet continue to, is the society of following your passions. And I couldn't agree more.
And you asked at the beginning how I seem to stay sometimes above the fray. I think it's part of it's because I don't care who gets the credit.
Yeah.
It just doesn't bother me.
Me
I
neither.
don't care about that, you know? And I'm finding more and more young people who are that way.
Yeah.
So I really don't. As long as we are successful.
Yeah.
I got a call today from, I thought this thing had completely died. I had made a pitch to help another church get some funding they needed. Got a call about 2 hours ago that said, hey, I think it's going to happen. I think that everything, the planets are going to align. And I really am excited that somebody else is going to get to call that local pastor and say, hey, this is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So after I did the first one of these podcasts, I got this feeling in the room of great relief that I had a theory that Gastonia really needed a damn podcast, but I am just a vessel for this sort of medium of communication.
Yeah.
It did a lot for my life, but now all I am doing is allowing it to flow through.
Yeah.
I am just here to press start and ask some questions, because more than anything, I'm just incredibly curious, and the most curious thing on the planet is people. They're fascinating.
Absolutely.
And,
everyone's different. Everyone's unique.
Everyone's got a crazy story.
Everybody has a story. I remember the thing that used to be on CBS on Saturday mornings. Guy would take a dart and throw it at a map.
Yeah.
And go to that city, pick up a phone book when we still had phone booths and phone books, point to a street, a name, and go, and everybody had a story.
Yeah.
To me, everybody has a story.
This is just the 21st century equivalent of that mindset, but
so
totally.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I want to see those stories grow into a grand story.
Yeah.
Into a meta-narrative of this is a good place to be.
Yeah.
So
for once, I feel like I am finally exactly where I need to be.
yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.